I'll call this regular council meeting to order. Uncle Dave, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you'd remain standing for just a minute. Pastor? Give us your name and your church, please.
My name is Pastor Mike Saldivar from the Pataskala Grace Brethren Church. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to live in a country and in a community, God, where we have the freedoms we do. We thank you for the men and women that serve and protect us. God, we just pray that you would have your hand of safety on them. God, I also pray for our community as our leaders seek to do what is best, and just give them wisdom, give them understanding. And God, we just thank you for your goodness to us. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, Kathy, roll, please.
Powell,
Here.
Hayes, Barstow,
Here.
Lee,
Here.
Hicken,
Here.
Walther,
Here.
Carter.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum present. First thing on the agenda tonight is citizens' comments. Anybody wish to speak? Yes, sir. How are you, Mr. Hughes?
Good, yourself?
Good. Name and address, please.
David Hughes, 138 International Drive, Pataskala. I'm here for a couple of reasons. One is a drainage issue. We're all familiar with the heavy rains we've been having, but this goes back to 2015. In 2015, we had a drainage problem between my property and my property to the east of me, 128 International Drive. Talked to the previous service director. He came out, looked at it. I even talked to the mayor about it. And unfortunately, the service director at that time, because of the cost, they didn't want to fix the storm sewer, so they dug a ditch in our subdivision, which we never had ditches. Put a 6-inch pipe down, about 6 feet into the ground, put a cap on it. Since that time, the first heavy rain we had, that 6-inch pipe blew the cap off. Now there's a 6-inch hole there in a ditch in front of my neighbor's yard. Before we went to the city to correct this problem, our neighbor could cut his grass on his lawnmower. Now he has to get in with a weed whacker and take care of it. I talked to Mr. King about it. I talked to the present service director about it. And they came up and with an idea about shaving the embankment down his property. I can show every councilman pictures of this. That 6-inch drain pipe is not draining. It shoots up like a geyser. There's water in it right now. So the hole in the ground at storm sewer is still clogged. About 2 months ago, the city came in, my neighbor to my east, put a rotor-rooter down there to, I guess, clear the storm sewer up. Now that thing shoots up like a geyser. We have a geyser to the east of us, a geyser to the west of us. The problem is still not fixed. Back in the early 2000s, and I've mentioned this to previous councilmen, but nothing's been done about it, is that Taco Bell and KFC did not put their properties in correctly as far as drainage goes. One put a retention pond in. The service director and the administrator both saw it, said that the pond doesn't do anything. It's a dry pond. With all this rain in it, it doesn't go anywhere except into my yard. So now I have 2 properties in the back of me draining into my yard, Taco Bell and KFC. I'd like to know who gave them the occupancy permit without checking the drainage, because the drainage is not done right. So that's one reason I'm here tonight. The other reason I'm here tonight is that medical marijuana is on the table. I know several people that are in need of this drug. One's an 18-month-old little girl. She's doing a research program down at Children's Hospital for seizures. But there's a problem with this. The way I understand it from one of your councilmen or councilperson is that the state hasn't really given any directives down on how to control this. We have an opioid epidemic right now. Now we're going to talk about putting medical marijuana on there. You read the articles in most of the papers are blaming the doctors to prescribe these opioids. What's going to stop a doctor to prescribe medical marijuana when it's not really needed? You're saying one thing today in the newspaper, but all over the state, and it's not this community alone, all over the state saying medical marijuana is great. Who's controlling it? That if I get it from my doctor, I don't give that drug to somebody else. You know, we're just adding to the problem. I would suggest Pataskala sits back, waits to see how this all works out in other communities. Once we see how it's being controlled by other communities and by the state, then we can go into it. But right now, I think we're sending mixed messages to our teenagers. One is like, don't get in your mother's pill box on our drugs, but yet we're making it medically all right, law-abiding to get medical marijuana. How much time do I have left, Mayor?
You got a minute?
Okay. The other thing is the Parks and Recreation. I'm not against parks. I supported parks. I've been here longer than most everybody in here since 1973. I worked on the park down at the swimming pool. But I think the city needs to prioritize. Just had a group of people in here saying that they don't have the proper water pressure. I'm here saying a lot of storm sewers aren't being properly maintained or put in correctly. I like to see the city comes up with a comprehensive plan and say, you know, here's what we need to do in this city. And I don't think parks is at the top of the list. I understand from the city administrator that the police department is understaffed. You know, when the income tax passed, that was one of the things we wanted, police and roads. We still have road problems, all right? I go down many roads in Pataskala, and my car is bumping all over the place. So I think we need to sit down, pull back a little bit, and say, okay, here's what we need to do. Here's how we're going to finance those things before we start adding levies for parks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to speak? All right, introduction, discussion, and approval of consent agenda matters.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Mr. Hicken and seconded by Mr. Barstow. Discussion? And roll, please.
Powell,
Yes.
Barstow,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Hicken,
Yes.
Walther,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Okay, consent agenda passes. On to reports. All right, just wanted to mention and thank publicly, since she wasn't at the last meeting, thank you, Kelly, for helping me with the fireworks. Very successful, and I appreciate you and your husband for letting me borrow her for the time that she helped me with the fireworks. So, okay. Of course, we're going to do it all again for the power show too, so I'll be needing your help. So, I'll be hollering at you. Thank you very much for your help. Let's see. Just wanted to recognize real quick. Of course, you probably saw it on Facebook, but Janice, our finance manager, has been with us for 22 years. And so I took a quick look, and we have some other folks. Detective Ramsey's been with us 12 years as of July. Mitch Rader from our utility department has been with us a whopping 21 years. Congratulations to him. And Stephanie's last name, I'm sorry, Tallman. I don't know why that escaped me, but Stephanie's been with us for 17 years, so congratulations to all those folks for working so long with the city. The library is having a Bring the Farm to You this Thursday night, so I'm sure that will that means there's going to be some animals, obviously, at the zoo or at the library. So at 6 o'clock Thursday night, the next event at the library, Bring the Farm to You, 6 o'clock. And I just wanted to mention real quick, we all know Jim Dewhurst has Real Church over here at Liberty Christian. He gave me a call over the weekend, and his group, who had come in here to clean up and mulch City Hall in the spring, has done it again. They went out to Beechwood Trails Pool, and spent the whole day working at the pool to bring it up to speed. So just wanted to reach out to those folks and thank them. He also told me that they've raised, they had the kids sell ices after their 2 church services the other weekend and raised $400, which he's going to get to me to give to the folks that had some problems with flooding on Main Street and Oak Meadow and in the trailer park. So that's going to get divvied up between those folks. So hats off to Jim Dewhurst and Real Church. That's all I had. Mr. Hicken.
The one thing I wanted to talk about really quick, I don't think we've talked since the floods about what a great job the people that kicked in, from the fire department to the police department to the service department. And so I want to say thank you very much. They're the first activation of kind of an emergency plan, and it was something I know that I talked about when I first got on council, and it was I appreciate Mr. King and I think Mr. Haynes that went to the fire department. And
Alan, myself, Jason Fravel, and Deputy Chief Bowles.
oh, that's
and
right.
Later on, Chief Brooks came down.
Thank you. Thanks to all for making a terrible situation, but responding to it. And that's all I have.
Yeah, I'd mentioned, you guys probably heard already that, we kind of did a mock drill at the fireworks, and then a week and a half later, we kind of implemented it. So it did work very well. So yeah, utility department and street department and administration and our police department and our fire department. Kudos to all. And then, of course, Mr. Lee, I wanted to thank you for giving us some goodies. There was a lot of folks that, about that time of day were either getting ready to go home because they'd been on first shift all day and ended up, I think that happened at 10 or 11 in the morning when you got called away. So I know you hadn't eaten. But Mr. Lee gave us a whole bunch of goodies from the coffee shop, and I made sure that our police and fire and city administrator had something to munch on because it was starting to go into the 7, 8 o'clock hour. So thank you, Mr. Lee. Appreciate that. Mr. Zetz?
I have nothing tonight.
Mr. King?
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to mention that in a couple weeks, the Pelotonia event's going to be coming through the city August 5th. We'll be traveling through same route. I know that the police have been coordinating as they always do, and it seems like a pretty smooth process. The other thing I wanted to spend some time on is our police station bids that we received. A couple weeks ago, we had the bid opening, received 8 different bids. The bid was structured to have a base bid, which was the main building, and then 9 different alternates. One of those alternates was actually a deduct, a savings. So 8 of them were additional things. Of the 8 bids that we received, one of them came in within the 10% above the cost estimate threshold that we would be able to award. It was real close. That did not include any of the alternates being included, so no cruiser shelter, some additional cabinetry, some polymer floors. I know Dave King is here. He spent some time meeting with the contractor who submitted that one bid, Palmetto Architects, and just reviewing everything to see what potentially was driving the costs. After all those reviews, and I had a chance to meet with Dave at his office last week, taking a look at a path forward, there are options, like I put in my email. One is to move forward awarding the base bid, the one that could be awarded, not doing the alternates, including cruiser shelter, landscaping, that stuff. So we would have a base building for that. And the math that I gave to you guys we would end up at a cost of about $5.38 million for that. That does include, it does not, that includes the $500,000 note that we've already issued for the design. There was identified, and Dave identified about another $129,000 in savings that we could realize by changing the light fixtures, removing a utility contingency, removing the parking lot gate, removing the base, landscaping project, and just some other things. That would land us $5.259 million, as I put in my email. What we've budgeted for, and correct me if I'm wrong, what the expenditure that we've represented in the budget is $4.5 million. Council did authorize up to $5.5 million in debt issuance. $500,000 of that, though, being the $500,000 note that we issued for the design. So what our options are at this point, and we can hear from Dave then too if council has questions, is to award the base bid. Go with it, see what happens with $100,000 contingencies in there, and then see if we can include some of the other stuff based on how we proceed. Or we take a deep breath and we go back out and we rebid this. What we are responsible for cost-wise at this point is $500,000. That note is going to be coming due. We have not issued any of the debt for construction yet. We could put a stop to it if we needed to. That $500,000 that's coming due, with us being in the situation that we're in, we could take the money that is in the capital facilities fund, that $400,000 that was transferred over from the police budget. We retroactive back to the beginning of 2016 have been dumping the lease revenue into that fund, so there is cash in that fund to pay off that $500,000 note, and I do recommend proceed with paying that off. And when's it coming due?
August 22nd.
So.
Service payments due.
So that's where we are. I summarized everything in my email. I've had a chance to talk to some of you. Happy to answer any questions. Dave's here to answer any questions of where we are. Would like some feedback from council on how you're feeling direction forward.
Any questions for Dave? I know I have one. Go ahead, Tom.
I got a couple for, I was just looking to see if anybody else wanted to go. I'll kind of bounce between Mr. King and Mr. King. The one number in here, you know, I'm not into construction or architecture or anything, so these are kind of, I'm learning as we go here. That cruiser shelter, I just, it blows me away that something that simple would be that much. Is there a way, I mean, I didn't go back and look, but if I remember throughout the process, the number that we kind of looked at, and correct me if I'm wrong, for that was around 80? Is that right?
The cost of the cruiser shelter?
That we thought when we were doing our needs assessment and some projections.
Well, as we started looking at spaces, the
Yeah.
advertised estimate was $150,000.
For that, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that was a preliminary number. I was looking at.
Three-sided shelter.
But I guess my first question for you is just how in the world is a simple three-sided structure like that with water and electricity, nothing fancy, anywhere from 197,000 up to 225, I think was the highest?
Around there. First of all, let me just say this, and then I'll answer your question if
Right.
I may. I do want to apologize for the fact that the bids came in higher than what we had estimated. We are, of course, very disappointed in the outcome. Fortunately, as Mr. King pointed out, there is one contractor whose bid is awardable if you would choose to take that path. We were surprised, getting to your question, and this is over the whole context of the project. We were pretty confident in that the numbers would fall. Our estimate on an average unit cost was $241 a square foot, 16,744 square feet. Average cost $241. The Palmetto bid, the low bid on the base was $265, and it went all the way up to a little over $300. I was very surprised by that. I anticipated, based on previous projects, that we would be anywhere from $238 to $245. I felt pretty confident. And that's even with the point that we know that the contractors are busy. But we got 12 contractors taking our drawings, and we had 8 bids, and so therefore I felt pretty decently confident that we would be in that range pretty close. To get 8 bids, even with a good bidding, with a climate of a lot of work out there, I was surprised by the numbers. We did meet with Palmetto a couple of times. We even had a conversation with his electrical subcontractor over the phone in Palmetto's office. And one of the items that we addressed, we were looking where our potential savings could be, was their number was $206,000, and we felt comfortable we could get that to about $130,000. And the primary driver on that was the use of block that has a faceted face to look like brick, so they'd be more compatible with the main building. And the approach to get it to 130 was to downplay that, to do something else instead to provide wind protection, rain protection to the structure. So hopefully that answers your question. We think we could get it to 130. The estimate was 150, 206. Really surprised.
Okay, fair enough. If we were to, let me back up a minute. I am not in favor, just me personally, of starting to trim this thing down like that and get what I believe would be an incomplete project. I mean, not landscaping it. If anything I could see cutting would be the cruiser shelter for now. I do see the need for it. Definitely see the need for it, but if that was one thing we had to trim down, I would, be able to, think about that. But starting to trim these things down, just me personally, taking out the evidence lockers or cutting them down, and I'm not for that. My question would be, since I've said that, is if we were to take a deep breath, and as much as we all want to start this now, our needs haven't changed. We still need we still need a police station. If we waited and rebid it for a spring start date and gave these contractors a little bit more time, then instead of doing it right on top of each other, do you think that if we rebid it as is, would that play a role in driving costs down?
From all the information that I've gathered, I talked to 2 architects who I've known for a long time, who work for firms, do a lot of public work. And I talked to 3 engineers, including our engineers on this project. And across the board, they all suggested not to rebid, that you're better off working with the contractor, if you have a good contractor, and negotiating numbers. Mr. King alluded to the fact that with the contingency fund, once the slab is in and we start doing the steel framing for the structure, we'll have a really good indication of that contingency fund balance. And you could start to use that potentially to buy back some of those alternates. Even though we were confident in our estimate, we still had a concern because we knew the marketplace was busy, and that's why we did alternates, because those alternates are the kinds of things that could be done at a future point that did not need alteration to the main building. The landscaping, just to make clear, was extra landscaping, not a base package on the landscaping. It was just doing more. So that's what we're hearing. How to predict what would change, I don't know. An important part of this, I think, for your consideration, and we'll proceed however you wish to proceed, don't get me wrong. But again, I did a lot of research to see what's to the best advantage of the project, understanding that you have budget, working within your limitations that you want to set, what your potential is. I can't predict what would happen, but the indications are, and I tend to agree, that you probably would see higher numbers. And for instance, during the bidding process, prevailing wages on some trades went up 3 times during the bidding process in Licking County. But the contractor's bids had to reflect the original published prevailing wages that we put in the project manual. So right there, you were seeing increases in labor. So what happens between now and the spring in the economy? Our goal would be, if you wish to take a breath and move forward, that this would go out to bid December, January. So you get it turned around as soon as the weather goes. Everybody's telling me, well, the people I talk to are telling me that you're better off working with a contractor negotiating prices. If you want to rebid it, then we would sit down, we'll have to strategize what do we do to get you there. An important part of this is two items. Is I went through a lot of numbers with the contractor, Palmetto. On the general trades package, their bid was actually under our estimate. So as we talk about concrete and brick and paint and all of those things, the general trades, we were in good shape. So that reflects on, well, do you take square footage out when it's not the general trades package? It all came down to primarily, the HVAC was about $28,000 over estimate, fairly small number in the context. It was about the electrical. And the electrical had two components, the standard electrical package, lights, outlets, et cetera, and then the technology that goes along with the security system, the electronic control system for door controls, cameras, et cetera. Those two numbers, at first we were concerned that it was in the tech package, the security package, but that turned out not to be the case. And in my conversations with my electrical engineer, he contacted the sub and the supplier for that system, and that the supplier gave out the same number, which our engineer felt very comfortable with, was in his estimate. He gave it to 11 different electrical subcontractors. So it was all about the standard package, about $400,000 on the electrical. And we started really looking at that. And again, Mr. King made reference to the lighting fixtures. One of the things that the electrical sub to Palmetto suggested was that without hurting the look of the building on the inside with the light fixtures, we could probably do some reductions. And that, I forgot that number, it was a little over $100,000. And so we just started, okay, how about this, et cetera. And that's the numbers that Mr. King reflected to you in his memo. So I think it's about the electrical primarily. Plumbing and fire protection, they were right in there at the numbers. So it's hard to give you a definitive answer. If that's how you want to proceed, we'll package it the best strategy we can come up with to go out and rebid it. I'm worried, however, that's the honest way to say it. I would be worried about additional, the cost would go up.
I have two more questions, Mr. Mayor, but I want to give everybody else a chance. So if you want to come back to me, I'm fine with that.
Sure. Mrs. Carter?
I don't necessarily have a question as much as I do just to share my thoughts about the process and which direction we decide to go. First, Mr. King, I think we should pay that $500,000 off and not take on the debt. If we can pay that, then we need to do that and get that off our books. Secondly, I feel like as we've went through the police station process and we've looked at everything, that everything's been very reasonable. Nobody's asked for a Taj Mahal. Nothing in there is excessive. So when we start talking about taking away from things, I have a problem with that. I don't want to scale back and then hope that we'll stay under a price point which is already higher than what we talked about or what we expected. From the beginning, I feel like from the conception of the first conversation about getting a new police station up to today has been relatively quick, considering how things typically go in city government. So I'm not okay with crossing our fingers and moving forward with the scale backs at a higher price point than we expected and hoping that we're going to stay under. I mean, that's a huge amount of debt to take on. And I realize that we would be taking our chances to wait. But sometimes, when the pressure's on like that, you need to take that step back and wait. And it has nothing to do with my lack of support for the station building and our department. Actually, it's because of my support for them, but also looking at the well-being of our city as a whole, that I say we need to slow down a little bit. Just my thoughts.
Mr. Powell?
I agree 100% with Ms. Carter. I don't want to scale back. It's obviously needed. There's a need, but I don't want to rush it and get ourselves into a bigger hole than we can get out of.
Okay. Mr. Barstow?
I have a question, actually, it's for BJ or for Jamie. When we
were talking about this before we had the bids. We were looking at a debt service, I think of about $390,000 to $400,000. It varied, but it was in that ballpark. And that was based on what we thought the cost was going to be. Does anybody have an idea what the cost, what the debt service cost would be, the bond payment would be, based on the $5.3 million that we have?
Jamie worked on that this morning, so.
Yeah, when we originally did the debt service calculations, you have to assume what kind of rate you're going to get over the life of it.
Well, let's make the same assumptions that we,
Correct,
just
correct.
apples to apples.
Over the first 5 years, and that's as far out kind of as we went with the forecast, it averaged about $325,000 annually. Adding it up to the new number, I asked our advisor, said, okay, make it $5.3 million plus cost of issuance. What does that do? It took it up to about $425,000. So it added about $100,000 a year-ish to the debt service.
I have a question, also that's for BJ. What's the ramp? What's our ramp for projected to be for 2018?
About $650,000.
Thank you.
Mr. Walter?
Well, Dave, I sat in the meeting with you last week when it was flooding everywhere else, and I couldn't help but think about all the other problems we have in Pataskala. I went back between that meeting and this one and looked through all the different numbers we've been shown since we did. I feel we followed the process correctly. We did a needs assessment, went through, did an original budget, and so forth. That number's gone up quite a bit since those first numbers came out. The first numbers were right around the $3.8 million number. That was very early on, obviously not including the $500,000 debt for the design. We're rough numbers $450,000 over a number that we were already dramatically higher than what at least I was comfortable with initially. I'd like to put out there that, and I'm going to disagree somewhat with what we've designed is not what we can afford. I'm not saying that we've designed something as a Taj Mahal, but there are definitely aspects of this design that I would say we need to really take a good hard look at. And whether it's the electrical package, or whether it's the size of a meeting room, or whatever might be the case, even as you and I have talked some details on windowing and that kind of stuff. But I think there is a definite need now to take a breath, look back at what we can afford versus our needs. Because we've obviously designed something that we can't afford, and there's a lot of variables that go to that, including the economy, including to the trades being busy. That's all true. It's all very true, and who knows what the spring will bring, as far as what our trades will be doing, but. I would, for one, say that I think we really need to step back and really look to see what we've designed and what we can afford. So,
Mr. Hicken?
Well, I got a couple things. The first one is, this is just a general question, is what roughly would it cost to rebid it? What's it cost for the advertisement and stuff like that, if assuming nothing was changed?
Average about $1,600.
The next question is...
Oh, and we'd have costs as far as printing and all of that.
And I don't know, with the architects redesigning, whether there'd be any additional costs as part of that as well. That would be a question for Mr. King.
I was kind of assuming that we did not redesign it, but not that I'm on that side. I'm just trying to gauge. I don't want to forever be in a point of going, yeah, we didn't get what we wanted. We'll just wait and bid it. We just wait and bid it. But I think it's pretty clear to most of us that I do not wish to incur that extra debt and bank or anticipate that we may be able to get a cost savings on the backside, because I just don't think we have the money. Whether it's because labor costs have gone up and we can't afford that anymore, or whether it's because we may be able to cut something out to stick with it and have, advanced lightning protection wasn't even in there.
We had as an alternate.
That was an alternate. And so if you look at what the base package is, That would not, if you just went with the bare bones, if that's the right word. That's no car shelter. That's no extra landscaping, but no advanced lightning protection. And to me, that doesn't seem to work. I have a quick question. Most of these companies are in the business of this. Have you ever seen that many companies bid so far over the 10%? I was going to say, I can't imagine why a company would even do that. But, yeah.
Well, I'm going to maybe reflect, because I've seen that happen before, and typically that'll happen when there's a lot of questions on a bid and they don't want to show their hand. So I didn't want to bring that up necessarily. I was going to bring that up offline, but that's an excellent question, Tim. They know that if they're over 10%, they're thrown out. You know it right now. So to have every one of them except for one, and the one that did put it in at $323, just under the 10%, did so with that was a calculated move on his part. There's no doubt about that.
I have no doubt.
So I think there might be some room to have some explanation to the contractors and maybe some more detail to the contractors. For instance, the sanitary line that has to be exposed, whether we've got whether they need to move sanitary or not need to move sanitary. That's something we can answer ahead of time and maybe take out, and I forget, Dave, if you remember that number. Was it a $40,000 number?
Well, there was a contingency that Jobs had in there originally for $11,500 if we had to relocate it. But we told them that we did not want to have a contingency inside the bids. So by addendum, we took that out and told them to bid on the relocated, or to bid on the assumed location to be sufficient.
Okay.
We didn't want that confusion.
So that's an excellent question, Tim.
So, all right,
strategy-wise, at least.
And so for me, I mean, I think that I'm at the position where I don't think we should go forward with the bare bones and hope for some savings. I think we should investigate something else. Whether it's a rebid, whether it's a scaling down on a rebid, whether it's a, so that's where I would fall on. Sadly.
Yeah, I was frustrated too. That seemed like such a waste of time for 7 people, knowing that by Ohio revised code that we couldn't accept that. It just seemed very like a waste of time. But that was one of my questions, which has obviously been answered. Mr. Lee, have anything else?
Yeah, a couple things. First thing, just looking through these again, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Chief, but and this is your building. I like your thoughts on these cuts. Are these things that get in the way of your goal of a 30-year building? Are these things you could live with or live without? I think it's important for us to get your input because it's yours.
My only comment is reference to the lightning protection. I don't think it's worth doing without that. We're already in that situation, and it's cost us tens of thousands of dollars not having that kind of protection. I don't see going into debt to do the same thing.
Yeah. The lightning protection, in my mind, is a necessity. Yeah. Can't do it without.
The analysis that we did for Mr. King in a memo, we were looking, based on a conversation with Palmetto and our engineers, as we were looking at adds and potential deducts, to get to a number that was the 5.3 number total project. We definitely put in the
lightning protection is in there,
not
correct?
That item.
Okay, and then finally, this is kind of a two-part question, but we've made cuts with Palmetto to get us, to this point. What my question is what is Palmetto, if they really want the job, what are they willing to cut on their end?
I would have to ask that.
Because we're giving up a lot here, and I think if they really want the job that bad, that they would be willing to also.
I can ask them.
And one thing I think, Brian, chime in, but I think one thing we need to be aware of is that we did a public competitive bid, which we're required to do by ORC. So if we start asking people to change numbers, do this, I get uncomfortable running afoul of that process because other people, nobody else had the opportunity to say, well, what could you cut?
And that was the second part of my question is if
I was sending you ESP apparently because
Yes.
as he was talking, I was thinking, and it must have went to you.
You'd have
But
to do
I
it
agree
by the
completely.
You'd have to do it by the change order process. You would have to award the contract as bid, and then through the change order process, you can look at adds as well as deduct potential.
Okay, that's a great point, because that was the next part of my question is if the chief and everybody sits down and there's some of these cuts that would be palatable, that's where I believe that it should go back out to bid and see if everybody else could give us a better deal than what they are. So that's all I have. Thanks for coming.
If we were to rebid at this point, and we did get some good numbers, and we broke ground, could we still have it under roof by bad weather?
I would anticipate, well,
If I can, real quick.
Sure.
The rebid would not be, we would wait to rebid it, as Dave said, December, January, February, with an anticipation of a spring groundbreaking. To try to rebid it and get it under roof at this point, you're looking at a couple months just for the bid process. And then by the time you have pre-construction meeting, award the contract. So if we rebid, we know that if we get an awardable contract, we're going to break ground in the spring.
yeah, it's,
Yes, sir.
I don't know this Palmetto company. I don't know anything about them. But am I wrong to have some caution with a company that would come in at $323 under bid, and somebody said they were taking a risk? My concern would be, I don't want this to get to the point where at the all of a sudden these you want your building finished, it's going to cost this much more and this much more, and et cetera, et cetera. The sort of horror stories that you read about and hear about with
You have some background with
the
Palmetto?
government contracting, where all of a sudden your $2 million building is a $4 million building, and that's an exaggeration, but I don't want to have that either.
well, and first of all, I would agree that it's likely that was a strategic decision on their part to be under the 10% level. Fortunately, I was pleased also by the fact, was one reason why we felt fairly good about the bids before they were open, was of the 8 contractors, 5 of them had built buildings for us, and one of them was Palmetto. So they're familiar with us as a firm. They're familiar with our engineers, because we almost always use the same team. And I know that they're familiar with how we put the packages together and how we work with contractors during construction. One firm that didn't turn in a bid in the Akron area said specifically that they were going to go after the project because they know the quality of our documents and what to expect. So I felt very good about the fact that we had so many that I've worked with before, Palmetto being one of them. I'm confident that they would do the project and would not want to take advantage of the project. Can't guarantee that, but I have that level of confidence with my experience, which was a project for Department of Public Safety, Highway Patrol. It was a sophisticated project, a lot of communications and security systems, and it was inside the state of Ohio's EMA building on 161. So we had a kitchen full of chiefs and a lot of input coming in, and they handled it very well. And when we went through the change order process, because it seemed like every time we turned around, some other department in the building said, well, I need, I have to have this. And they were good.
I worked in that building. I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they were good at dealing with that condition where we could negotiate change orders as they came up.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any other questions for Dave? Yes.
If I can just say, wrapping up, I think Horning King's done a great job for us. I was extremely disappointed when we started opening those bids, and I just had my fingers crossed that something would come in. I know the 240, what I've learned through this, $241 per square foot is pretty typical for a building.
Well, it was
like
until
this
the other day.
until the other day. A bid that's $323 under the 10%, I almost look at that as unawardable as well, because it just makes me real uncomfortable getting that close. If you're going to be under, you want to have a comfort level doing that. My recommendation sitting here tonight is to proceed with paying off the $500,000 note. Take a deep breath. Don't proceed with the debt issuance, and then rebid this thing later this year, early next year, with trying to get a spring start to it. This doesn't change the need for the police to have an adequate building. You know, I will say that there's a need for the police to have an adequate, safe, up-to-date, actual police building. So it doesn't change that. But we also have to be careful as we move forward with this, make sure we're getting what we need at a price we can afford.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kane.
And so with that being said and no other comments, I would say that is the direction that we will proceed in.
I would agree.
I would agree.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll contact you tomorrow.
Sounds good.
We'll have a meeting to strategize.
Thanks for coming, Dave.
Mr. Nicholson, do you have anything else, BJ?
That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. Mr. Nicholson?
Gave my report before I left last week, but interesting the comment about the police station with the lightning protection. As you know, on the 10th, we got hit by a fairly strong bolt. Phones all the handsets were fried. Janice worked with AT&T for a number of days. They kept thinking, well, it's this part, it's that part. Kept bringing in parts. Eventually realized it's irrecoverable. It's dead. Fortunately, we were well along the way of replacing the system with the new IP phone system. So we were already in the process. We were hoping to do this like in late August and early September with a very organized project where we would port all the numbers and we'd be up and running and very little disruption. That's not what happened, so we were able to get the equipment. Everybody has phones on their desk. Unfortunately, Jess and Janice get all the phone calls. So every call that comes in goes to Jess. If she doesn't get it in 2 rings, it rolls to Janice. So Janice has been fielding a lot of calls. She had a rough week last week, so I took the wrong week to go on vacation, I guess. But they've both done a great job with this. So we are in the process. Everybody's phones obviously roll to there until our KeyTel, who's our IT provider, on August 3rd, the administrative this building will have the numbers ported. We're working with Time Warner. We're working with CenturyLink. Any other number of parties that, you know, as you can imagine, moving a phone system is fairly complex. And then the police station the PD is set for August 7th. So when those numbers get ported, then we should be live and running. So when you call BJ, you'll get BJ instead of Jess or Janice. So I'm expecting sometime on or after the 3rd of August, this building should be up and running. So fortunately, we were well on that way, so we didn't have to jump through even that many more hoops. On the desks on your dais tonight, I passed out, as I mentioned earlier, we were going to do a popular in the financial report. This is a semi-final version. We're tweaking a few things. I'll apologize for the color because this will be printed, and formally printed. This is color laser, and colors are pretty washed out. But take a look at it. I'd be interested in some comments. The intent of this really is to give summary financial information to the community in a format that is more user-friendly than the CAFR, which is 250 pages long. And even I gloss over when I start reading some of that myself. I write a lot of it, you know, so it can be overwhelming. But this tries to get it out. We're hoping to have these all printed, have a bunch for the street fair, as well as we're going to do a community mailing like the mayor's quarterly newsletter. So this is our first shot at this. We're going to maintain this as a process. I think it's a valuable exercise. And after you guys had a chance to review it, stop by, email, call, whatever. I'd be curious feedback, things you think, hey, maybe we could put this in there next year, or, you know, those types of feedback. So I'd welcome any comments on that. And I think that's all I have.
Anything for Jamie? I just want to bounce right back to BJ for just a question. Lightning protection for this building, where are we at?
Waiting on proposals to get it installed. Yeah, we don't have any in this building, which surprised me. So I've reached out to a couple companies to get estimates to get the lightning protection put on here.
Very good. Thank you. Nate?
You're welcome.
Howdy.
We knew about the water main break happened while I was on vacation. So what I did last week was, at least in my time here, sometimes we take for granted, those of us that are on that end of the business, you know, what exactly is a boil advisory and what you can and cannot do with the water under precaution, things like that. So we drafted up a nice little letter to send out to the folks, the customers. just a future FYI, and how we're going to handle this in the future again. If we get another situation where we're worried about half of our customers, here's the notification process. This is what it's gonna look like. Continue to evolve on social media and looking at, mass phone systems like the, school shooters. We've been kicking that around for some time, and how we're gonna split it across the funds and departments. And we'll use it, once we have something like that, it'll be, well used, so. Other than that, got a lot going on. Just trying to keep up with everything that we have. I'm still getting back in the groove of things. I do appreciate the sugar mill folks, dialogue with the water pressure. I will say on record, and if they were here, and I'm gonna follow up with an email again tomorrow. If there is a situation on the weekend where it takes 5 minutes to fill a 5-gallon bucket, we would like to know that, and they should call the emergency line. I believe our dialogue has been open with these folks, so they know they can call or email. If that is going on, we would like to see it, and of course compare it with some of the data that we have regarding some of the pressure readings that we have. And so we'll continue to be open with that and do our best as far as the utilities go. As you guys know, we did a study, updated our hydraulic modeling system. We brought that before you guys because there is other developments interested in the 310 corridor. So at first glance of what our contractor has done with the modeling, updating things from 2013, as far as a new development going in, there's no concern in the area where it's being proposed, closer to Pataskala Ridge. But they're also giving us recommendations on what we're going to do with this water system. A lot of it is things that we already are aware of, removing bottlenecks in the system. So I want to reel back a little bit too. I heard something about comprehensive planning, which is wonderful and great. We have to also know we put these ideas down, eventually we got to pay for them, right? So part of our struggles, we have, like some people that live in Pataskala, you have the new and the old Pataskala, right? Maybe the old village and then Lima Township type of thing. Well, we kind of have the same thing with the water and sewer system. We have a system that was built, well, in the beginning in the 40s for the village. And it's added on throughout the years and pushing everything east that we have. So a lot of this in there is identifying, hey, there are some restrictions here. One, how do we pay for it? And when do we kind of changes? And we're looking at options with maybe developers. There's one option at the phase 2 of Brightwaters where they're looking to add on in there. We've already started a dialogue with those folks. One of the bottlenecks in our system is leaving that big southeast tower going into Brightwaters through a 6-inch water main. Well, it's a 12-inch going to the tower, so who, when, and where decided that was a good idea? So we're going to at least identify them, fix them, put numbers behind it, and hopefully give you guys a better update as we go through the budget process on our SWIMs, our capital improvement projects, and just trying to do our very best to find ways to pay for it. So we're doing everything we possibly can with your investment. That's all I have.
Very good. Anything for Nate? Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I want to thanks you guys for the signage and getting out our water meter replaced in my neighborhood. That went fine. But on the boil alert from I know you weren't here, but on the boil alert from the big water main break, we didn't get any notification of that. So there was no signage put up in my neighborhood. I was out with some of my HOA folks. We were sort of passing the word. But especially in some of the condos, and you're going to find a lot of older residents, and they don't rely on social media. They don't use email. I know we have folks in my neighborhood that don't have voicemail. So there's got to be some alternative ways to get the word out, to let folks know, especially in areas, again, with condos, a lot of older folks, they don't leave every day. They don't come in and out a lot. So, and maybe working with our HOAs so that the board members can get out and walk the neighborhood and let people know. Yeah, that's just that this is just that's a lesson learned from the big break a couple weeks ago.
It really is, and it's one of those that we've always gone above and beyond as far as what our requirements are under that advisory, and several levels of testing, and I wouldn't say that there's an easier path, but there's one for less confusion when it comes to notifying the entire city. So lesson learned there, and at least, so the letter that we drafted up is going to every bill. So like a place at your homeowners, where everybody gets their mail, you know, we'll get some post it there. And one of the things that we put in that too is moving forward in the future, you know, well, I put it in there, we need your help. For that example, if there are folks that are shut in that we might not. We know, like with that break that we had, Ryan went and bought, I think, like $100 worth of bottled water and took it to the Oaks.
Right.
You know, or if our neighbors next door to us, we know that there's shut-ins over here. So even if we get a running list or have an idea in the midst of some of this, we can at least know, you know, some of the sensitive target areas, and then we can hit them.
Yeah, and again, I think the HOAs will typically, the board members and neighbors will know who can't get out or who needs bottled water. If somebody has someone who's has a medical issue and wouldn't want to risk using the water, you know, needs to take other precautions. So yeah, no, it's just going forward. I think that those are some of the things working. And everyone in my neighborhood was very appreciative and cooperative, and you know, no one was upset. They all understood what had happened. But a lot of folks had not even heard about the water main break. They didn't know, and so they didn't realize. So
Appreciate it. Thanks.
In that situation too, and we talked about it at the utility committee meeting, you know, the break was before the booster station. So at some point, we were worried that, like where your development, eventually we got to the point where the towers and Beechwood trails were dropping. So it was one of those, they were worried we'd get to that point. And it was one of those, but they outpaced themselves. They did it faster than they thought they would, and maybe that would be, I don't know. It's a party, what can I say? We love it.
yeah, thanks, Nate. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor.
All right. Yes, sir.
Hey, Nate, real quick, on your 2018 budgetary items here, these three items, you've got the WRF phosphorus upgrade. You've got a different number in your swim versus what you put on the front here. Is this a part of the project that you're?
Oh, yeah, what did I put?
It was $2 million in your swim. It's $400,000 on the front. I just wondering if you're thinking about phasing this out.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Because where we're at with the phosphorus thing, and I'll kind of tie this into police station a little bit. It's related, but not. You know, they went through this upgrade, started before I got here because the EPA said fix it or start paying fines. I say, based on what I've gone through since I've been here, they did about 70% of what we probably should have on that upgrade, knowing that something like phosphorus was coming down the pike. So large scale, I think in order to go the route we need to go, it's a $2 million project because of additional digester space, possibly chemical feed buildings, things like that. We're at a point with the press that we have. I'm hoping we're going to get some other vendors, equipment manufacturers out, do some testing and see if some of our phosphorus related are tied to filtrate from the press. So I'm thinking, well, can I fix this by upgrading our press and then a $400,000 purchase, and we don't have to go any farther with it. But that's the
And when do you think you'll know? Give us more details on that as we get into the budgetary process.
Oh, yeah.
You've
I've
got
a consultant that's going to look at it with me as far as what we've compiled as part of the study, and then I'm good at kind of guesstimating some of these numbers. I like them to help me kind of fine tune. So if I present you a number, we're close.
And the other, just to follow up, the other two items you have on here are directly from the Strands report, correct?
The water line, yeah.
And will that do anything to affect the sugar mill pressure?
Based on the report, the preliminary findings so far, really the only resolution that we have for our system is improving these bottlenecks. Based on the hydraulic analysis, if we did both of these repairs, it might be a net gain of 4 psi. That's the possibility that we're looking at. What it'll do is it'll provide free exchange of the water through larger diameter pipes. Residual benefit is some pressure improvements throughout the system. To what degree, again, that's something. This is taking in and kind of manipulating the data with what we know and getting us in the ballpark, and it looks like 4 psi max, at least with that. The largest recommendation that they've had so far is raise your towers 50 feet.
Right, I remember that one.
Yeah.
Ain't gonna happen.
Easier said than done, or you're building brand new towers next to them, and that's if we take our swims, what we're looking at with capital improvement projects, those aren't even in the $8 million of estimated projects we have. So if you're doing something like that, I don't know, add a couple million onto it, so I don't know how practical it is right now.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Haynes.
Thank you, sir. Just a couple highlights from my report tonight. One is we have Resolution 2017-052 on tonight's agenda. That is for award of a contract for Law General for the OPWC-funded Columbia Road Culvert Replacement Project. Our engineer's estimate on that was $225,000. Law General came in at $179,000. So that looks like a pretty good price, and looking forward to moving forward with that one. The other is the ramp. The ramp is actually behind schedule due to weather. Shelley Company's supposed to be getting back with me this week on more definitive schedule. Right now, it's looking like the first or second week of August before they actually get started on that.
And you were reminded during the committee meeting that nothing's going to happen around the street fair area, right? Thank you. Any questions for Alan? Thank you, sir. Mr. Fulton.
Thanks, sir. Two highlights from my report. Two ordinances. The one that deals with the rezoning of Sugar Mill, which we have a public hearing on tonight. The other being the amendment to the discharge map that did go through agricultural and cultural committee. They recommended approval for the changes on the map. Essentially, it came down to some lots and platted subdivisions that were omitted during the last revision. So this going along with council policy of placing those lots from platted subdivisions into the
Thank you, Scott.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to thank Mr. Haynes and Mr. King for getting out to the issue, in the drainage issue in my neighborhood, and working with those folks that they don't live in my neighborhood, they live right next door, and helping them out. I hope that the developer will follow through and get that taken care of and won't be a problem.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Chief Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. As BJ mentioned earlier, the Pelotonia is going to be August 5th. It's a Saturday. It'll come in the city from the south on Summit and just kind of intertwine up through the west side of the city up to Headley's Mill. So I'd like to urge everybody to be a little patient. They do tell them to follow the rules of the road. However, there's just certain areas that we do stop traffic and let them get through. It helps everyone. It helps them get through quicker, and the city business gets back to normal quicker. And I need to say that our honorary officer Braxton Long passed away this morning. That's all I have.
Did the bike route change, or is it staying the same?
It's the same, Mayor.
Okay. Are we going to use our lights this year? Broad Street probably is our worst one, right? Broad and Summit's the worst.
Yes.
Broad and Summit's the worst crossing.
Can use our electronic board signs to let people know that prepare
I
for
believe we did that last year as well.
prepare for stopping.
Yeah, we're doing the same as we did last year.
Anything for Bruce?
Yeah, what's the peak? Maybe we should put out try to establish what the range of the peak time is for when they cross, so that folks can, go another way or be prepared to have a delay.
We start seeing them around 7:35-ish.
Okay.
And it'll go till about noon.
Right. Okay.
And we'll get word out.
Okay.
Anything for Bruce? Are we sending anything to the family, or is Detective Ramsey working on that, or?
Yeah, we're taking care of it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Committee chair reports? Yes, sir.
We had a street committee this evening. We had a number of items on the list. The first being that we evaluated the Oak Meadow reconstruction design. It's at a 30% position right now, or completion right now. We will have to say that it is over budget currently. It's about $250,000 over the original budget. This is for a design that would include repaving the existing street, putting in storm pipes. It's come to the attention of the city that there's a $110,000, $114,000 off-site storm that is going to need to be installed along Hickory Road to supply adequate drainage for the Oak Meadow project. We have looked at a number of different items, including whether the path if it's going to be an asphalt path as versus a sidewalk. Alan is still looking into some of the issues. We had brought up some questions at the committee, but he is moving forward to the 50% design. We reviewed the ramp program. Alan gave us his bad news on the weather. The Summit Road drainage, we don't have anything to report on Summit Road drainage improvements. Kylemore subdivision, we received an analysis done by Strand for a couple different alternatives to fix some of the drainage in that subdivision. And the committee is going to review that, and we'll discuss it further at the next meeting. The Columbia Road project, Columbia Road culvert, as Alan has mentioned, did come in under budget at the bid, and we did make a motion to accept that. I believe we did, didn't we? Yeah, I think so. Taylor Road culvert, it's a little bit delayed due to the lead time on ordering the concrete pipe. It's going to be a 30-day closure when that does occur. And then we're continuing to evaluate the detention and retention basins. And at this point in time, it's the committee and Alan's suggestion that the Mill Street culvert that was planned for 2017 be pushed back to 18 or maybe even beyond. At this point in time, it just seems with all the construction in the area and all the scheduling of closures that an additional closure on Mill Street would be a very bad idea. And we're going to get too late in the year to get it in. So we'll reevaluate that one for 2018 or even beyond that.
That one's still wide enough and safe enough, it's okay. Because I immediately thought, I was half listening, and I thought it was the one on Columbia.
No, it's not that one. Well, I would have
unsafe.
said that would have been a bad idea.
Right, okay, very good.
Yeah, because the pavement's failing in that one.
Right.
So.
Well, I get the bus driver, you can't, it's just terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Well, in the Columbia Road, that's the one that the motion's on, or the legislation's on tonight to accept the bid to widen and replace.
Yeah. So unless anybody have any questions?
No, I just, either Andy or Alan, could somebody let Lonnie McGowan know that possible, if you determine to bump that back, let him know, because he's been texting me about quite often wanting to know, because you guys had surveyed for Mill Street, I'm sorry.
Lonnie lives right there on the north side. Lonnie McGowan.
He lives in the brick house there by Mill. And
he lives on the north side of the culvert.
So if somebody could just courtesy call him and say, hey, it's getting bumped back if you determine to bump it back. Thanks.
Any other committee chair? Yes, ma'am.
I have two. The first is from our park board meeting on July 11th. Just a couple of highlights from that meeting. Soccer registration ends the 29th. We should note too that the cookout with a cop date, the 26th, is also the opening day of soccer. And the time is a direct conflict. So.
Are there games at Freedom Park then?
No, they're just talking
the
about the ability to participate.
I see.
In one or the other.
Gotcha.
So that's something we need to make sure everybody's aware of, so they can try to get to both. There was a lot of updates on things going on in the parks and things to be fixed and the outline, but basic stuff was the dates, and you may have talked about this at the last council meeting. I was not here, that the concessions from the fireworks brought in $1,112.50 to go back to the fireworks.
Wow. Thank you.
For parks, that's really kind of a very high level overview, but that's big stuff. We also had a development committee meeting this evening and covered a lot of topics. The first, we had some gentlemen come in and present with a proposal to annex the land directly behind Coghlan, which is currently in Harrison Township, into the city, and put approximately 256 apartment units on the property. The units are 1 to 2 bedroom type. Rent ranges from $1,000 to $1,300. They basically told us that Harrison Township is not interested in them being there. They asked us very plainly if we were not interested, so they knew whether to move on or not. So we didn't have any discussion with them with a tight schedule, but there is information on that I can give to Kathy so she can share it with the remainder of council, some maps and different things that they provided. So if you would like to chew on that information a little bit, and so we can give some feedback to BJ so he knows what to pass along to these gentlemen who came in. We had a follow-up on the discussion we had at our last development committee meeting about accessory structures and the amount of variances given for the size of the structures. And we're finding that, up until just recently, 100% of the variances would be approved. So we were looking at whether or not they needed to even, that they even needed to be requested. I mean, is it something that we're rubber stamping? Are we charging a fee when we shouldn't be? So Scott gave us a couple of options, one of which being to increase. The big thing with the accessory structures is the size, and that's where we see the majority of the variance requests coming from. So the first option was to increase it by 100% and then put a cap on what would be allowed to, the variance that would be allowed to be given. So they would be capped at 100%. It would be prohibited after that. The other option was not to require a variance at all. If you have, whatever size you want to put on your size of a structure you want to put on your lot, it would still have the setback requirements, still have the height requirements, but typically your environment kind of weeds out the size that you would have, meaning HOA rules or placement of septic tanks and things of that nature. So the recommendation from the committee was that there kind of be a mixture of the two. For a lot under 2 acres, giving it 100% increase in our code, so it allows for less variances, and that weeds out, I think what was it, all but 2 that maybe came through. It kind of cleared those out, and then if you have over 2 acres, there would be no size limitation. So you will see a recommendation coming from Scott at our next council meeting with some of that language in it. If anybody have any questions on that? The next thing, we had a lengthy discussion about the food truck regulations. And the draft proposal was sent out to council. We went through a number of the options in that to discuss, fairness and some edits. So we'll get some edits at the next meeting, and we should see those to council in the next few meetings, but it'll be brought back to development committee at our next meeting. Let's see, subdivision regulations, those are still being worked on in the planning and zoning department. They will come to us hopefully soon, but definitely by the end of the year. So we should have the subdivision regulations shored up for council's review before the end of the year. Let's see.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think there's one more, I'm sorry. No, it's everywhere. Oh, the neighboring property notifications. We talked about that at the last council, or at the last development committee as well. and it has been changed to 300 feet from the structure. So notifications to anybody within 300 feet
Of the property line.
of the property. Sorry, yes.
Very
And
good.
then that's consistent with the auditor's website, so it's easy to go back to, and then the city will be responsible for making the notifications. And that's it.
Anything for Mrs. Carter? Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome.
Yes, sir.
Utility Committee, it's been a busy month. The Utility Committee meeting had Utility Committee had a meeting on July 17th. Nathan's already kind of told everybody in his water modeling update, but we got that firsthand from him. We spent a little bit more time digging through the numbers and talking about why certain numbers were the way that they were. We had a fairly lengthy discussion about tap fees. We have been trying to get our brain around tap fees for a while, and ultimately, when it comes to tap fees, there doesn't seem to be, people just set them how they set them based on where their debt is. It's not, if it's three-fourths pipe or a 1-inch pipe goes to a 2-inch pipe, the tap fee doesn't necessarily double. So we had a long discussion about that, and Nathan's going to try to bring our tap fees in line with and in, what's the right word? Bring them in line with neighboring communities, but also remain competitive. I think is what we came out of that. We had a follow-up discussion, which for this group will be moot because we approved the well pump purchase, but we followed up with Nathan, and he gave us some insight as to how that request came to council. We had a couple of questions about whether or not people were trying to cheat us by lowballing us and then charging us more for pumps or coming in later. So we cleared that up. And we discussed the possibility of adding a fire hydrant to Foundation Park, which was an incredibly brief discussion. Other than that, did I miss anything? I don't know, Mr. Walter, anything?
Nope, you covered it.
And that's all for that.
All right, thank you, sir. Any other committee chair reports? All right. Unfinished business. Ordinance 2017-4288 for a third reading.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Barstow.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hicken. Kathy, when you're ready, please.
Ordinance 2017-4288, this is the third reading, an ordinance to amend Chapter 1203 and Section 1263.03, Section 1221.06 to Chapter 1221 of the codified ordinances of the City of Pataskla and repeal all other ordinances and parts of the ordinances in conflict therewith.
Discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I move to adopt ordinance 2017-42.
Got a motion to adopt?
I'll second.
Was seconded by, was that Mrs. Carter? Okay.
To refresh my memory, Mr. Mayor, can you tell everybody which ordinance this is so that they, or Mr. King?
Yeah,
I know
this
it
is the-
was in our legislative report, but
Yeah, this is the one adopting the demolition regulations for structures.
Demo regs.
just want to make sure.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that, Tim. I needed that too.
All right, Kathy, when you're ready.
Arstead?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Hicken?
Yes?
Walter?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes.
Powell?
Yes.
Ordinance passes. Ordinance 2017-4291 for a third reading.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hicken.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Walther. Kathy, when you're ready. Third reading.
Ordinance 2017-4291, this is the third reading of ordinance to amend Chapter 1203 and add Chapter 715 and Chapter 1299 of the codified ordinances of the City of Pataskla and repeal all other ordinances and parts of the ordinances in conflict therewith.
Discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Move to adopt ordinance 2017-4291.
Got a motion to adopt?
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Walther. Discussion? And roll.
Hicken?
Yes?
Walter?
Yes.
Carter?
Yes.
Powell?
Yes.
Hayes? Or excuse me, Barstow?
No.
Lee?
No.
Ordinance passes. On to new business. Ordinance 2017-4290 for a first reading.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hicken,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Walther. Kathy, when you're ready, first reading.
Ordinance 2017-4290. This is the first reading, an ordinance adopting the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation to deny the rezoning request for the property located at 7856 Hazelton Etna Road, Pataska, Ohio, parcel number 064-152-988-01.000.
Any discussion on the first reading?
Really quick. Ms. Klima mentioned something when she was up there, kind of stuck in my craw a little bit. She mentioned that one member of the planning and zoning might have a conflict of interest because they live in the neighborhood. That's right behind it. I'd like to get that cleared up if we could. Does that, I don't know, maybe it's a question for Mr. Zetz. Does that present any kind of conflict of interest? Simply living in the adjoining neighborhood?
In the same neighborhood.
Same
neighborhood.
I'll have to take a look into that. I thought that was already, didn't we already address that, Mr. King? And Mr. Zetz, I thought we'd asked about that, clarification on that at one point. I could be wrong.
Just don't remember.
It's a
We
good
might
question.
have.
It's a good question, Mike. I just thought we.
Let us
I thought it
follow
was
up with
addressed.
council.
Yeah.
We'll get something, I'll talk to Mr. Zetz and we'll get something out.
Okay.
It's only first reading, so we'll be in good shape. We'll get you your answer, Mr. Powell. Mr.
I
Walter?
do have a question for Scott. Scott, will this project be required to do a traffic study, an independent traffic study? An actual traffic study, I should say?
The proposed rezoning this evening?
The proposed rezoning, correct.
Yeah, at some point if this were to be approved, it would still need a conditional use through the Board of Zoning Appeals, and they would need review from the Transportation Corridor Overlay District through the Planning Commission. At one or both steps in that process, they would definitely do a traffic impact study to be considered.
Okay, and so I guess a follow-up question, why wouldn't we do that? I mean, why wouldn't we ask them at this point now, so that we could understand? I mean, we've obviously had this issue put in front of us, a traffic survey was done. And rightfully so, the questions are brought up, would this impact their use during these certain peak times? Why wouldn't we do that now, before we go through this denial of a rezoning?
Typically, it's just to say, I'm rezoning it to local business. My intent is to do project. At what point do they not follow through with that? They can say, you know what, I decided I'm shifting this. Basically, it's the first step of the process, and we don't even know if a daycare can even go there. So they could do a traffic study based on a daycare during the rezoning process, but they don't have the next step in the process to say a daycare can go there.
But isn't this a chicken and the egg? Which comes first? You know, they're not going to have a daycare there if they can't show that their traffic isn't going to adversely affect the adjacent property. I mean, I'm not speaking for everybody, but it sounds like it's a pretty strong statement from the Planning and Zoning Commission that they didn't agree that they should be there for reasons such as traffic.
And I don't want to put words in the Planning and Zoning Commission's mouth, but it's just at this point, it's just to rezone the property from two local business. So there's a multitude of uses they can do. They're not tied to doing a daycare center at this time. So there's no need to do a traffic study, because then it would open up to any of the other uses that are permitted. If they're pursuing a daycare through the conditional use point in the process, then they need a traffic study to present. But at this point, they're not tied to doing a daycare.
Okay. One follow-up question, just a write-in, write-out on 310, similar to the bank that down in Etna that did a write-in, write-out. Is that going to be something that you would foresee not being permitted on 310? Do you know of any reason why they would not be able to do a write-in, write-out onto 310 on the southern portion of their property?
I don't know, but I would, and not to put Alan on the spot, but I would refer to Alan for access to these projects.
Okay, Alan?
It's very close to the intersection there with Stony Ridge and Sugar Mill. That would not be favorable.
I mean, with a 1.25 acre site, you're not going to have a whole lot of frontage there to get you far enough south from that intersection, I would think. I'm no engineer to be careful. If I can address the one about doing the traffic study, now it certainly is premature to do a traffic study, because This is just a use, as Scott was saying, for a certain property. You know, they could come in and request to rezone this, and we wouldn't know what one of those uses they wanted to do, and they're just looking for permission. Then, once we know what that use is, you say, okay, that's what you're going to do here. You're required to do the traffic study. So at the rezoning step, certainly premature.
I fully understand that it's premature, but these questions have been brought up. And I would think an answer back to them would be, suggestion would be a traffic study if you want to move forward with this rezoning. Traffic study meaning, is this going to adversely affect the sugar mill? And I know Ms. Klima brought up that they had an existing traffic study done. I'm sure it took the permitted uses into condition. I would hope it did at least. So I don't think it's that far-fetched to go into a possible use as a traffic study if they really wanted to go through with this rezoning. Anyhow, just an idea.
Mrs. Carter?
And I'm just going to echo what Andy said, and I understand the steps in the process, but when it's brought to council because of the denial from planning and zoning, and we're being asked to make a decision as to whether or not to let somebody use their property for a business that they want to start based on complaints of traffic from the residents. I mean, the residents already live off 310, so I'm not sure how much difference this would actually make for them. However, if I'm going to make a decision and have to vote, I would like to know any business that goes in there, especially one for a daycare, since that's being specifically requested, how badly that would impact them before I can say yes or no to something. It feels like I'm just doing it arbitrarily if I don't have more information.
Mr. Hicken?
You know, I've been struggling with some of this, and I've been bouncing up. Do you want us to talk real quick?
Let Scott answer that for real quick.
The thought would be, because if someone comes through with a rezoning request, and let's say they pick a piece of property and they want to rezone it from A to B, they are not required to say, when I rezone it to B, I'm going to do this. So the applicant was forthcoming and said, ultimately, this is the goal, what are the steps we need to do, so we talked through this, but no one's required to say, if I'm rezoning it from A to B, when I get B, I'm going to do this. It's open to all the uses that are permitted under that district. So to come in and say, we'll do a traffic study, well, there's 250 different uses that I could do, so at what point, how do we conduct a traffic study when I don't know what I'm going to do? I'm setting it up for potential uses. We have site plans to show where the access is coming from. There's a multitude of things that at that point in the process it would be premature to do a traffic study on. It's just the information isn't there.
Well, and I understand that under normal circumstances, but when we have a specific complaint and somebody has stated and we have to make a decision based on it, I mean, that's one of the extenuating circumstances where additional information such as that, since that's the specific complaint, would be helpful for me anyhow. So,
Mr. Hicken?
My question, Scott, can you clear up for me just to be sure? Let's assume that doesn't happen for the exact reasons that you talked about, and a person with a parcel that has recently been rezoned, and he wants to put a convenience store there, and he pays. I assume he pays for the traffic study to put the traffic. It's zoning then looks at that? Is it BZA or is it zoning? Who's going to look at the traffic study and say, wait a minute, it says, or is that just you? Is it the Office of Zoning? Is it BZA or is it zoning appeal or zoning?
Depending upon the use, it could be Board of Zoning Appeals, it could be Planning and Zoning Commission, or both. Also, when that comes to us, we route it around to the city engineer and Public Service Department, going to take a look at that traffic study and weigh in with their professional expertise to come back and say, this is an issue, this isn't an issue, and then that information goes to Board of Zoning Appeals, Planning and Zoning Commission, or both, throughout the process for them to determine, based upon the traffic study, the feedback they got from the engineer, Public Service Department, whether that traffic is acceptable, proposed ways to mitigate it are acceptable, sets of eyes that once we get that take a look at it and weigh the options that are presented.
And any one of those can say no, and it's enforceable.
Correct. If they determine that the traffic is, the impact is unacceptable, and, you know, if there's ways to mitigate it, to make it more palatable, that perhaps the applicant is unwilling to do, they can say no to the request. But depending upon what use is depending upon, use and location depends upon what route it takes ultimately.
Thank you.
Anything else for Mr. Fulton or anything, any
Mr.
other
Mayor?
discussion? Yes, sir.
I hadn't really thought about the suggestion that Andy made and Mel brought up as well about doing that first. I agree with Mel that this is kind of a different circumstance. At least in my short time on council, I've never been put in this position to have to come back to something that board looked at. But do we have any authority to do that, or what kind of cost would be?
We can request them to do it.
That's all you can do.
That's,
That's all
and
we
that's,
can do.
Tommy, just, that's what I was suggesting is, you know,
Yeah.
there should be at least a suggestions, at least look at it from LB. Look to see if there's anything that, you know, would dramatically, stand out to a traffic engineer, not just a survey, but a traffic engineer to say, this intersection doesn't work at 8 a.m. if you put a daycare in here. It's pretty easy to figure that out. So it would certainly help, I think, from a position of relieving or understanding exactly what the traffic situation is there, and also letting the property owner know you can't put that there. It just doesn't work. If it doesn't work traffic wise, it's not going to work. Nobody's going to approve that. So that's all. That's what I was suggesting.
And on top of that, I've gotten to know that HOA being in my ward. I've spent some time with them, been to a couple meetings, and they're a phenomenal group of people. And I don't want to speak for them, and I'm not doing that by any means. But if that study was done, maybe I think it should be shared with them, and maybe it could potentially, again, not speaking for them, change their mind a little bit, or it may not. It may take it completely the other way, but they're very reasonable people, and I think it'd be a good kind of middle ground to start with if we could do it. When I did meet with them last time, Mr. King and I went, they are fully aware of the other things that it could be, because we presented both sides to them.
Sure.
Like, hey, we understand where you're at, but we want you to look at the flip side of it as well. And they're very receptive of that, fully understood it. But I think it is a good idea to request that.
We'll make the request.
I think at this point, it can't come from staff, it would have to be from council to say they'd like to see a traffic study completed.
We can,
Because it's before
yeah.
council.
Well, what we can do is carry the message back that that one of the things council would be looking for, if they were willing to do it, is a traffic study.
I think if they listen to the minutes, they'll figure out pretty quickly that that's going to be helpful.
Mr. Barstow?
Can we get the materials that planning and zoning had at its meetings, including, if it's available, a recording or a transcript of the recording of the meeting where this was voted on? I think that would be helpful, so we're not.
I believe about a month before all those materials are posted on the council website.
Okay.
I can get you a copy of the minutes if you like. But
If there's anything that was presented at the meeting that was not on the website, if somebody offered an exhibit or some sort of material. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anything else on 4290?
Just real quick, if we ask them to do a traffic study, will we be asking them to do it based on what they plan on putting there?
arguably, at this time, if their intent is still to do a daycare center, I think it'd be in their best interest to do their traffic study based upon.
Okay. Thanks for that, Scott. Appreciate it.
Okay, ordinance 2017-4292 for a first reading.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hicken,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Carter. Kathy, when you're ready, first reading.
Ordinance 2017-4292, this is the first reading, and ordinance to revise section 505.11C of the codified ordinances of the city of Pocasset and county of Hockensack.
Discussion?
I'm embarrassed to ask this question because I'm on the agriculture committee, but what ultimately did we decide to do with the the Licking County Parks parcel that was one of the ones we were to consider. Whatever happened to that?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Essentially, Todd, we determined that we would address the other or 5 of the 6, and basically take our time, take a deep breath, and kind of get some more information and revisit that one at a later date. Is that how you recall it, Scott?
Yeah, from my recollection, we were told there was, like, I think 5 total. Six total proposed changed areas. Number 4 was the park area. There was a motion to remove that and take the other 5 forward to amend.
Yeah, the motion that the committee made was take 5 of those 6, remove the addition of the Licking County Parks to the non-discharge area, and move forward with the other 5.
I just wanted, but did we ever talk, did anybody talk to the park, Licking County Parks?
I haven't.
Nothing ever happened? Okay.
Mrs. Carter?
I just want to mention with my, goal to educate that it's the Licking Park District. It's not actually Licking County. It's an
Well, the county
independent
doesn't-
group, Licking Park.
Licking Park District is the
Yeah.
correct pronunciation of that.
Yeah, so it's an independent group. It's not the county, which is part of the misconception when it was on the ballot.
Licking Park District. Okay, thank you. Resolution 2017-052, resolution authorizing the city administrator to accept the bid of and enter into a contract with Law General Contracting, Inc. for construction services for the OPWC-funded Columbia Road Culvert Replacement Project.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Walther.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hicken. Discussion and roll.
Powell,
Yes.
Barstow,
Yes.
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 Resolution passes. On to motions. Any motions tonight?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion for the city to pay the debt owed to Horn and King out of, do I need to see from where, or will you know?
Just, I guess basically, just not from the issuance of new debt. I'll pay it out of the debt service fund, which is where the monies are.
Got a motion? Need a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lee. Discussion?
I would just say that we originally planned for this to be rolled into the bonds, but there is no bonds to roll it into. So it's about to start cranking up, and we
We have to come up with the money.
got to come up with the money, so we might as well pay it now, and that's why we put money aside.
Yep.
Blah, blah, blah. All right.
Okay, any other discussion? And roll call, please.
Barstow,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Hicken,
Yes?
Walter,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Motion passes. Additional citizens' comments. Anybody wish to speak?
Yes, I do. Based on what I heard tonight,
Give me your name and address again. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Hughes.
hard memory, huh? David Hughes, 138 International Drive. Based on what I heard at night, I heard new police station's going to be put on hold, partly because of funding. There are other funding issues. Again, I've said, I'll repeat it, this parks issue that you all voted on, we have other issues that's more important than our parks. Our roads, we have road issues, we have sewer and water issues, we have the police department issues, we're understaffed in the police department, but yet you're going to the voters, and I know it's a small levy, a millage, but you're going to the voters and asking for more money. Get your priorities straight. If you don't have enough money for the police station, you don't have enough money in this budget to put a culvert in, you don't have enough money to do the water department or the street department, we don't need money put aside or taken out of the taxpayer's pocket for the parks at this time. We need a new police department. We need more police officers. We need better roads. We need storm sewers. I called one of your administrators up, and I won't name names, but on the recording says, I'll try to get back to you. That doesn't work. In business, when I was the manager, if one of my employees had it on a recording, I'll try to get back to you, I would have fired him. your customers. Every one of these people out here are your customers. You don't try to get back to them. You get back to them. I've been waiting since 2015 about the drainage issue in front of our house. I have not been heard of from any of the people that I've contacted. They've contacted me, I will say this, and they tried to do the problem, but the problem has not been fixed. 3 months ago, I was told by 2 administrators here that they would get back to me about issues on drainage. Hasn't happened. And you want the taxpayers to go to the polls in November and vote for parks? But when you're going to have it in the paper this week that we put the police department on hold with a new, that doesn't make sense, folks. That really doesn't make sense. So between now and your next council meeting, you better get all your heads together and say, what are our priorities? Is it parks? Hey, if we're flush with money, fine. But if you have a police department that's in a building over 100 years old, without lightning protection, you have problems. Thank you very much.
Anybody else wish to speak? Okay, we'll go roundy round. Start with Mrs. Carter.
I want to say to the chief that I'm very sorry to hear about Braxton. I know a lot of our officers, and you had become very fond of him and close, so that's sad to hear. And be saying some prayers for his family today. And just, I know it's been said, but really over the past 2 weeks, we've had a large amount of insanity with water main breaks and flooding and phones and everything else. And as always, our staff always goes above and beyond. And so it really is appreciated. I know you guys have spent some long hours in here. And I personally, have been contacted a number of times about the drainage and flooding in the ward that I'm in. And, knowing that you guys are getting that from everybody in the city, I appreciate your continued efforts. And that's all I have.
Mr. Barstow.
Nothing.
Mr. Lee.
Nothing.
Mr. Hicken.
I have nothing.
Well, I'll just say there is a little boy that's in heaven tonight, for sure. And I do appreciate all the work that Horn and King has done and the chief, and we worked very hard. We're obviously not giving up. We're just going to push the reset button because we're very close. We're obviously not going to compromise on the building. We went from the front door to the back door 100 times on that thing to make sure it was efficient and the smart, right thing to do, and it would keep us going for 35, 40 years, whatever. So while I'm disappointed, I also want to make sure that this project is strong and well-funded and that there's no slip-ups, because the folks that obviously have been against it forever would love to say, told you so. So just a minor setback. And yeah, we have been busy, and and you weren't here, Nate, but I drove by that Sunday afternoon, and you had like 6 or 7 guys out there, and you get this typical one guy working and 6 guys watching. Well, in this case, 7 guys were all working like a Swiss watch, and to hear. I was down at the fairgrounds when all this started happening. BJ kept me posted, and then I got a call from several restaurants and stuff. It's like, we've got water already again. So, they isolated it, got the water back on, and I appreciate what you're doing to educate the folks. Good work to all, and especially with the flooding. That was pretty crazy, but we got through it, and we're moving on. As a landscaper, everything's green and pretty, but I'm a little sick of mud and water myself. Mr. Zett, you got anything?
Nothing.
Mr. Walther?
I've got a few things, Mayor. Thank you. First, I wanted to tell you that we've got an Eagle project that we're looking at over at the Leeds Park. This will be the final part to that park to finish it, an all-volunteer produced park. So this would be fitting for it to be an Eagle project to complete that project. Hopeful to be done in the fall. Second item, just wanted to remind everybody, and of course this is an item for the Development Committee also, we need to start thinking about a steering committee. It's been in Scott's write-up a few times. This is for the comprehensive plan. Thinking about nominating people to be on that steering committee to make recommendations for the comprehensive plan. And then last, I'd like to announce that the police firing range is completed. And I'd like to make the suggestion that it be named after our honorary officer. So if everybody'd like to go down and see it, it's mowed and trimmed and all the targets are set up and ready to be used. So that's all I got, Mayor.
Beautiful. And speaking of Eagle projects, just want to ask you real quick, did Jared reach out to you? Okay. I think it's this weekend.
It is Saturday, and I was going to get the info out to everybody.
Yep. If you forgot, Jared Hampshire is going to be working on cleaning up the cemeteries and putting new fencing. So that's happening this weekend, so I hope he has good weather for that. Mr. Powell?
I just want to express my sympathy to the Long family. And other than that, I move we adjourn.
Got a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hicken. Discussion and roll.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Meeting adjourned.
Absolutely.
Down to the car crap now.